This is a homage beat.
To the doctors, I like how you did it and how you connected that. But like, can you expound a little bit more on that connection between the cardiologist and God and how you saw that and like why you put that, how you kind of went, because you went right from there. Like you were talking about the heart and the atrial, like and all that, like the blood pumping, and you went to the cardiologist, and then you flipped it and you went to the creator. So
Perfect.
expound on that.
So I say this and just flowing. Said the theologian's answer is no different from the cardiologist. I say, in fact, they complement perfectly. I say God is the master builder, the master designer, and the master creator. Therefore, it would reason that an infinitely wise, intelligent, all-powerful being will create a muscle designed to keep us alive. Not only this, but God designed the heart in such a way to remind us that we are not self-sufficient, but dependent. We are not dependent on probability, but on the one who created every aspect of our being. And so a lot of people, especially when you're talking about like religion and theology, they think it's incompatible with science. And I'm of the opposite belief. I believe because God is in control of everything, that science is ordered, and that's kind of a reflection of God's nature. So the cardiologist and the theologian, those are perfect complements because, like you said, all the cardiologists can tell us, this is what it is, we're dependent on this electrical pulse. But then the next question is like, how do you know it's going to keep pumping? Like you can only take us but so far, scientifically. And scientifically, no matter who you are, you have to admit that you are dependent on your heart. And I'm arguing that yes, you are dependent, but you're not dependent on probability. You're dependent on the one who created it. And so again, I'm always like thinking of the counter argument. So the counter argument would be, okay, if God created your heart, then why is it subject to disease or eventually give out? So if someone came to you with that question, like, what would you say? Because we on a time limit, a timetable. Yeah. Eventually, even if you die old age, your heart gonna stop beating after a while. So you trying to tell somebody God is the one who, or even this one, it's like, people who die early. Yeah. Why did God allow, such and such to die early? If he's in control of their heart, why he allowed them to die? And those are like real questions us as Christians have to deal with. So what would you say if someone came at you with that?
That's a scary thought, just like hearing that question. You saying like if somebody came like this, I wouldn't know what to say because it's like, I don't know, bro. It's like it's just a scary thought. Cause it's like regardless of anything, even if I tried to, everything that we know about the heart and keeping it going, we kind of created different ideas and have different thoughts on like how to keep it going, how to keep it pumping, how to do what's healthy for it. And I mean, just you saying that if somebody came to me and was like, yo, so why does God allow it? Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know, bro. Like, it's like, why does he allow these different things that I wouldn't know how to come to somebody with that. It's like, I don't know. Like,
and I think that's real, and I think just for you to even admit that, because a lot of times we hit with questions and we may not know, and I don't ever want to put myself in a position like I got all the answers, because I don't, but how I tried to respond to the question, because like I said, I didn't want things to just be surface level. I'm trying to think, because I always am like, people who come from like an atheistic worldview, they're super critical of, religion, especially the Bible. And it's like, I appreciate that because it sharpens me. But my only, beef is, why aren't you as critical of your own worldview? It's like, you so critical of me, and I should be critical of my worldview. You should question things, but you should be as critical, because if you do, you realize there's so many holes in your worldview. But in answering that question, it's like, why does God allow a heart to be subject to disease and eventually give out? And I say the answer is, he didn't. Your heart was never designed. You were supposed to live forever. Your heart was never designed to fall to disease and eventually die. That was never to be the case. I know if you have something to say.
Yeah, so I want to ask you that, like, as you hit on that, just to hit and piggyback on that question, that's why I like where you connected the piece where you connected the heart, the physical heart, to that heart having that symbolic, that desire, like God putting that desire in you. You know what I'm saying? Can you connect that for us a little bit? Like, can you connect that for us? Like, because we're just reading it, I saw you flip there, and I'm just like, whoa, how did he flip that? Like, how did he go from, like, how does he connect that as the author? How is he seeing that, like, going from that tangible heart to, like, how do I make it look like where my heart has a desire? Like, it makes it start looking like, I'll be thinking, like, when I'm thinking about a heart desire, I'm thinking about love and Valentine's Day and, like, the pretty red heart. So, like, how does it go from that? You look at the heart of somebody's body, they pull it out, it don't look like the ones that they draw, like, in the little shape. So how do you connect that for the reader? The reader that don't know, the reader that doesn't know the Bible, the reader that may not believe. So
good question. And so again, when I was coming up with these concepts, I didn't want to just use them like arbitrarily, because you look at Scripture and I say Scripture uses the word heart over 800 times, and most of the times it's not necessarily talking about your physical heart. And this is a truth that is even true outside of Scripture. You just brought up Valentine's Day. Like, that symbol that we use for love, the symbol that we use for desire is usually a heart. Yeah. You know, we use the heart symbolically, even if you don't ascribe to Scripture. You know, my wife has my heart. You know, this is my love, this is my desire. We just use it symbolically. Yeah. And so when you look at Scripture, it's used the same way. So the physical heart is reminding us that we are what? Dependent. And when we go and we're arguing that we're dependent on God. And if we're dependent on God, it's like we should do what he says. Our desire should be what he wants of us. And it's like, I went to this verse in Deuteronomy. It's Deuteronomy 10 now. And it's context, because I'm big on context. Moses is specifically talking about the people of Israel. Okay. But this is true of all of us. It's Deuteronomy 10, verse 12. It says, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all of his ways, to love him, to serve him, to serve the Lord your God with all what? Your heart, and with all your soul." So we seeing that heart connection, that, okay, we see our heart as what? Pointing to our dependence. I'm arguing it's your dependence, not on probability, but on God. Now, if you're dependent on someone, your desire should be to do what they want. I think the best way to, like, articulate this is in the parent-child dynamic. Yeah. You know, the parent provides and does everything. The child is like, my daughter, Autumn, she's completely dependent on me. She can't feed herself. She can't change herself. She can't do anything on her own. She has to what? Depend on me. And it's like, even though she's young, but I think she'll get to a point where she can articulate herself. It's like, she should what? Listen, obey, you know, do what her father says, because she's dependent wholly on me. And not to use it as, you know, an authoritative sense, but I've demonstrated my love to you by what? Being there to meet your need. Yeah. Like, as a child, you should do, you know, what I ask of you. You know, and that's the same way with God. God is the one who has given us life, who has given us a heart to remind us that we're dependent on him. Our desire should be to do what he wants. And the thing that I love about Scripture and just even Christianity is that it corresponds with reality. It's like, if we look at it, and I say, this is what God requires, and you just say that to somebody, and somebody look at you like you're crazy. That God requires that I love him with all my heart and my soul. I'm not doing that. Number one, I don't even believe God exists. Yeah. You know? So why would I do that? And it's like, why would you do that? Because your heart is dependent on something other than yourself. Yeah. So your desire should be what he wants and wills. But it's like, my desire isn't to do what he wants. My desire is to do what I want, when I want, how I want. And it's like, but you ain't create yourself. You know, you dependent. It's like someone who's self-sufficient can make that claim, but you're not self-sufficient. You need that heart to pump inside of you. Yeah. So it's like, how you gonna make that claim and just say, reject God, forget God, I'm gonna do what I want, when he's the one who done created you? I know if you sound like you look at you have something to say. No,
I was gonna ask you, like, as you spit on Deuteronomy 10, right there, it made me think about, like, Pharaoh and how, like, God hardened his heart. Yeah. Like, was, like, as you wrote that and you connected that, was it making you think about that? And, like, was Moses trying to remove them from that thought process, like, where they had a dependence on Pharaoh? Mm-hmm. Do you think that, like, did that come into your thought process, like, when in that connection there?
Well, I think, because I don't know if you're getting that, like, God just hardening Pharaoh's heart. I think the thing was, Pharaoh desired to do what he wanted to do. I think so. Oftentimes when we look at that verse, we kind of look at it like, man, that's not fair that God is hardening his heart. Yeah. But I think so. Oftentimes where we talk about grace, where if God releases that grace, you're gonna act however you want to act.
True,
so
true.
when God hardened his heart, I don't think it's more in a proactive sense.
Yeah.
It's more in a passive sense, where he just, because it talks about in Romans where God gave them over to the lust of their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if it wasn't but God's grace, we would be off the chain.
Yeah.
And it's only because of God's grace. But if we keep like, it's like we're constantly running and God is holding us back. God is holding us back, but we keep running away from him. And God is holding us from going as far because we want to run off the cliff. And God is holding us back. And then eventually God just lets go. And just lets us do what we want to do. Yeah. And so it's not in a sense where God's like, I don't like Pharaoh, so I'm going to harden his heart. Pharaoh's heart was already not desiring God in the first place, not desiring to let God's people go. And it's like, God just said, I'm going to step away. I'm going to let you do what you want to do instead of holding you back. Yeah. So I didn't make that connection when I was thinking, but it's a good point because it's still connecting that heart aspect, because Pharaoh's heart wasn't to do what God wanted him to do, because God wanted him to let his people go. And Pharaoh was like, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. And it's a perfect illustration of us. God tells us to do something, and we say, I'm going to do what I want to do. And it's like, how foolish a statement, because he's the one who controls your heart. And just even going back to Deuteronomy, where it's like, this is what God requires of us, to what? Love, serve, fear him with all our heart and soul. We look at that and we're like, yo, that's crazy. And then I use that Psalms 14 verse. The fool says in his heart, there's no God. But so just how prophetic God is, because you hit somebody with that Deuteronomy 10 and they say, there is no God. But then you got a verse in Psalms that says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And it's like, it's just almost prophetic where, yo, the Bible is just speaking truth to it, because if there's no God, I don't have to desire him. But that's a foolish thing to say. And you got scripture backing it up right now. So on that topic of desire, I was asking a question. I said, how have you lived life following your own desires and not God's?
Bro, I was thinking that right there when he was like, I'm like, man, this boy talking and like, he going at it like, I'm like, dang, I'm thinking about all the different things. Cause like, you can go so many ways with like, those desires of your heart and not really like understanding the concept. First, that it's always delighting the Lord. Then, but like we flip it on that. Like we looking for what's gonna be self-gratifying. So I mean, like, it could be anything, bro. Like, cause I mean, we even try to be modest. Like, oh, I don't feel that, but like money. I mean, anything. But for me, something right now, just going into being in my 3rd year of marriage, like, me and my wife really desiring to have kids, and just really understanding how, even though that's a thing that's good, and it's cool to have a heart for that and be like, oh, that's my heart's desire, but trying to understand, like, where does that connect with, like, putting God first, you know what I'm saying? So